Apparently the Digimon Adventure 2020 reboot is about 4.5 years old already. I guess it's been long enough that it's time for a rewatch. I'm 3 episodes into this rewatch, which means I am through the original arc of this series, which just happens to be its version of what might be the biggest Digimon movie, Our War Game. This was a bold choice right from the beginning because they're taking a story that was essentially a sequel to the original series and saying, no, what if that's the beginning? It's setting a precedent right from these opening episodes that while they're gonna play the hits, they are gonna be remixing this entire set list. It's like, you think we're gonna do the same thing of just like have a bunch of episodes devoted to champions, then a bunch of episodes to ultimates, and then we'll get some megas, and then here's Omnimon? No, you know what? Episode 1, Greymon and Garurumon, episode 2, Omnimon. A really important choice they make in these opening episodes too is the fact that Tai and Izzy are the only ones who are like actual characters in the first episode. And then even with the next 2, I would say only Matt is a real character. Like, we get slight hints of Kari talking and we see all the other Digidestin, but these 3 are the only ones who are presented as having really much for a personality or anything we get to know. The original pilot just threw us into the deep end, especially when it came to names. Like, we had the 7 kids. They all got a Digimon, so there's another 7. Plus, they all Digivolved to Rookie. There's another 7. Plus, we got Kawagamon for a bad guy. And in the end, while it wasn't the greatest for a first episode, it did work out in its favor. It gave us so many kids, so everybody has somebody to relate to make it so it's hard not to find something to latch onto in the show. But it meant for those early episodes, everybody's character except for maybe Tai was pretty paper thin. Where this one chose to focus in on just a couple people, just Tai and Izzy, and only give Tai a Digimon. So we're just getting to know a few at a time so we could truly figure out who these people are before we start moving on and getting everybody else thrown at us. On the Our War Game side of things, it is interesting to see how they took a story that is about communication, or how miscommunication can feel like the end of the world, especially as a kid. Like, that is the entire purpose of the entire storyline between Tai and Sora, and how he gave her the wrong present meant they were fighting now, and how awful it is. Versus in here, where they're doing the same plot, but now it's much more a story about willpower. Like, it is Tai and Matt's will to do whatever it takes to save their families that lead to where we get Omnimon and everything. Swap out Agumon for a Green Lantern ring, and this whole thing plays out the same way. So yeah, some thoughts on the first few episodes on the Digimon Adventure 2020 reboot. I don't want to binge this show, so I don't know how often I'm going to talk about it. But that's also what I said about Ghost Game, and then I finished the whole thing in like 10 days, so who knows. By episode 15 of the Digimon reboot, all 6 of the Digidestined have had their Digimon reach Ultimate. So this seems like a good time to stop and talk about Digivolution, both the Champion and Ultimate, and a little bit about the Crests. What's really cool about how they did Champion is it's not just about the Digimon needing to protect the Digidestined, showing that they could be this powerful force for them. No, this time, Champion comes about out of a bond being formed between the Digidestined and their partner. And it gets into what the prophecy's saying in episode 5, where it's like the spirit of the Digidestined is what's going to allow the Digimon to get to their strongest forms. Champion is the first show of this, where we see it's about the connection between these two and how that has to form first. And another thing I really love is the emotions of the Crests are playing a huge part in things even before Ultimate gets involved. Here we have a great moment from episode 8, where Matt is realizing the importance of having all these people helping him, the importance of friendship. And what does that do? It starts Garurumon glowing. This is a power-up now. It's not just about, oh, if you use the power of the Crest, you get Ultimate. No, if you have these strong emotions, it makes the Digimon stronger. It's adding levels to the whole things. It's making it so these emotions are constantly important, not just for reaching a certain level, but making sure the Digimon are fighting as strong as they can at all times. Then it's episodes 10 through 15, we get all the Ultimates. For comparison's sake, we get these same 6 Ultimates in episodes 20 through 36 of the original series. The choice to speed up this entire process definitely has some pros and cons. One of the most obvious cons is that if it's not given as much time, they don't create as huge a moments for it. Like, Tai was given an entire arc to activate the Crest of Courage in the original. Here it happens in an episode, and so it leaves less of an impression. But then the biggest plus is we have now gotten through almost every Digivolution that's ever happened in the original series, so now we get to move on to everybody getting Megas and the alternate evolutions and everything that come in this show that weren't in the original. And while some, like Tai and Sora reaching Ultimate, weren't as exciting, I think some of them were better in this series. And I'm thinking of Matt and Izzy specifically here. In the original series, Matt is shown to always be doing everything in his power to do good for the people around him. This is in part because TK is there, so he's thinking about his brother the entire time. Versus in this series, where he doesn't have TK. He's being much more that lone wolf figure. He's being much colder to everybody. So where the original had to come up with this idea to make him incredibly angry with Joe, to give up on that friendship, only to realize, no, friendship is important to activate his crest, this one instead is able to say, yeah, he hasn't been great at being a friend this entire time. He's been cold. He's been isolated. It is the episode he finally opens up that he gets WarGreymon. Similarly, in the original, Izzy had to choose to give up his curiosity in order to have to learn the lesson that it's important. It is a big part of him in order to activate his crest. Here, it is about his tablet not working, so it's him having to stop relying on the technology and believe in his own knowledge, his own intelligence in order to work through the problem. In these examples, we're seeing Matt and Izzy were characters who were already showing these things that their crests represent, so they had to be stripped away of them to relearn the lesson to activate the crest, versus in this show, where it really felt like a big moment where it changed for the first time for them, that activated them and got them to Ultimate. Let's talk about the Digimon Reboot episodes 16 through 18, what I'm dubbing the Battle of Fake Tokyo. This little trio of episodes is a pretty great climax after everything we've seen in the digital world so far. It starts off in episode 16 with just Tai's group, Tai, Izzy, and Mimi, going to what they believe to be the real Tokyo, but everything feels a little off. As it goes on, it starts to get a little more creepy, and it turns out none of the people here are real, and we start seeing eyes everywhere. Then by the end of the episode, after 5 episodes apart, both teams come together and work together. With all 6 of their ultimates, they're able to beat Angemon, and it is a pretty hype moment. Episode 17 here is a little more chill. They all have to regroup because Orcusmon is just a little too powerful, which gives us some great downtime with the Digidestined just talking. This is where Matt tells Tai about how he's worried about TK, a huge moment for their friendship. And we get a fantastic moment of the other 4 all together, talking about what they think their Digimon's ultimate is best for. It starts with Joe saying Zudamon's big, Sora being like, no, Garudamon is way bigger. Palmon says she's adorable, but Mimi says only as Lilymon. Kinda rough. And then of course Izzy comes in and he's like, but Mega Kabuterimon is the coolest. So yeah. Rejuvenated and believing in themselves more than ever, they come back to fight again and this time kick some ass. Which brings us to the battle against Nihogmon, the Mega level, with a countdown to when Tokyo is gonna be destroyed and they need Omnimon to win, and they're doing our war game again. This whole thing has been a variation of our war game again. Well, these 3 episodes in isolation are a lot of fun. I do enjoy them. I think the fact that they went back to doing the Our War Game story again 15 episodes later, well, it left me not loving the third part of this quite as much. Until it gets to the end, when it turns out we're not just doing the same thing again. Sure, Omnimon kicked ass. It doesn't matter. The timer goes to 0. They stopped an explosion, but they were too late to stop all the trouble this causes. Devimon got his way, and they get to see Devimon for the first time. At least Tai and Matt do, because everybody else is gone. So yeah, this was mostly a good time, but up until those last couple minutes, episode 18 was probably my least favorite episode in this rewatch so far. It's time to talk a little bit about Digimon Adventure's 2020 Reboot episodes 19 through 24, the introduction of TK and his Digimon partner, and the destruction of Devimon. This chunk of episodes gave us a lot of fun stuff like TK sleeping in a tube or WarGreymon surfing on one of WarGreymon's missiles. And it gave us a big climactic fight, sending us through different levels of Devimon, starting with Devimon, then Neo Devimon, and then down here, Dun Devimon. But what I'm most interested in with this section is talking about Digivolution, and starting with the mode changes. This is WarGreymon Altris mode and WarGreymon Sagittarius mode. What's interesting with both of these is it's kind of the opposite of how Digivolution usually works. We get a lot of interiority from the Digidestined. They have some big revelation, something happens for them, and that power from their internal struggle goes to the Digimon, causing them to digivolve. In both of these cases, it was more introspection on the Digimon's part, them being very inspired by what's going on with their Digidestined, them wanting to push through everything in order to be as strong as their Digidestined, and that is what allows this to happen. And in this, we're seeing that Digivolutions being treated as this real two-way street, where yes, it is the emotions of the Digidestined that is granting them the power to digivolve, but it is also their desire to be as good as possible for their Digidestined that is granting them power. And this, of course, leads me to when WarGreymon became Machinedramon. This is playing with so much stuff. For one thing, we have the miasma. That's like this darkness, this evil, taken a physical form, corrupting and destroying anything good by just touching it, but increasing the power of things that are evil. As they're taking on Devimon, Kari and WarGreymon are touched by it. So as they start to feel all the harshness of this fight, as they start to see Mac getting his ass kicked and everything, what might have been determination is turned instead to rage. We see how Ty's rage is working its way into WarGreymon, making him stronger in a more chaotic way. But similarly to how we got the different modes from the Digimon being so inspired by their Digidestined, here we didn't get Machinedramon because of Ty's rage. We got Machinedramon because of Ty getting chomped up by Devimon. And here we have Tokomon comparing Devimon and Machinedramon because, yeah, they've evolved to this super high level. They are so powerful, but they have lost themselves completely. They are nothing but rage at this point. And this version of Digimon that has been making itself so much about evolution, the talk of how the Digidestined will push the Digimon to go outside of the bounds of evolution, be as powerful as humanly possible. Well, this is adding a little caveat to that. Evolution for evolution's sake, evolution just for power, is not a good thing. You could lose yourself completely to this kind of thing. Just to make sure I bring them up, I love the fact that they split them into two groups again, where it's Ty, Matt, and TK versus Devimon, and then the other four have their own fight they gotta do to make sure everybody gets to be doing something, rather than fully focused on just the one or two characters that matter for this major fight. No, there's this other major fight going on, and they have to kick all the ass themselves. Episode 30 of the Digimon Reboot gives us our first full appearance of WarGreymon. Let's talk about reaching Mega. I'm saying full appearance because he has technically appeared a couple times already, including the fight with Devimon, but that was in like this glowing form that's being treated as like not fully becoming WarGreymon, but like a half Digivolution. But what's interesting to note with this glowing kind of middle form is that every time he became that, it was with the power of a holy Digimon or their Digidestined, with TK and Kari. The first time he fully forms as WarGreymon is the time he does it through his bond with Ty, and through courage. As we build up to the big moment, we go through Agumon's forms as he fights off everyone around them, and Ty and him think back on all of the things they've done together in each of these forms. It keeps it about both of them at every point, the bond that they've formed together, not just Ty's courage going into this. This is a much more balanced idea of them both building on each other. I think this is a very cool shift away from just it being about the Digidestined having this big moment. It is about both of them. A shift that they go even further with Ghost Game, it's worth mentioning, because there, it's almost entirely the Digimon expressing these new emotions they gained because of the Digidestined. Here, it's a bit of an even split. Let's get into Kari and Gatomon in the Digimon Reboot, which is primarily going to mean talking about episode 33, but I might get into 35 and 36 a little bit. So in this series, they do this fun little twist where it turns out Skull Knightmon, who's been an antagonist for, I don't know, 10, 15 episodes already, has actually been Gatomon the entire time. This is fun because it keeps the idea of Gatomon starting out as a bad guy while maintaining a mystery of who this person is, because most viewers of the original show aren't going to guess when they see Skull Knightmon or Dark Knightmon that, oh yeah, of course that's Gatomon. On top of this, we already had this kind of set up with how they were using TK and Angemon, and how Angemon was in the miasma, and it looked like on his way to become something like this too, to be his own dark figure. Now, personally, what I was especially excited by, because I love talking about the Cave of Darkness, is when Kari goes inside of Dark Knightmon, we get this look in here. We could see a couple images of the cave. And it's using the same kind of imagery. In the original series, the Cave of Darkness was this dark cave, and when they suffered enough, they went into what looked like this more ocean-like place. Inside of Dark Nightmon, Kari found herself in this dark cave and surrounded by this water and had to fight through it to get to Gatomon's goodness. It's using these callbacks to the original series in very fun and different than expected ways. After this, in the next episode, now that Gatomon's actually back to being Gatomon and with Kari, she doesn't understand how this partnership should work. She wants to fight for Kari, protecting Kari, instead of fighting with Kari like the rest of the Digidestined in this series are doing. It's only when she stops being just this protector and realizes she needs Kari's strength that Kari gets the Digivice and their partnership is cemented. And then finally, in this little trilogy of episodes, we get Angemon, and even this Digivolution is made so interesting because of the whole Skull Nightmon situation. It's not just that Kari and Gatomon being together is enough. No, Gatomon has to get over her own fear that evolution could potentially turn her into this. It's doing a version of Ty's fear of Greymon becoming SkullGreymon again from the original series, but having it completely from the Digimon side. And as a final thought on all this, it's hard to imagine a version of O2 coming after this because of all the changes they make from the original series. But one thing that's very easy to think about is Kari and Gatomon's relationship to darkness, because this series cements it so much more purposefully. In the Digimon Reboot, after Angemon appears, we get a chunk of episodes that are more of these fun, one-off, standalone adventures, and the show just chills out a little bit. The best of these episodes is episode 39, where the gang stop at a rest stop to get some food. This episode has two main things going on, the first of which is putting Commandamon through a Digimon car wash, essentially, which he's a very good boy and he deserves it. The next is Joe becoming potato buds with Potamon because they both love French fries just so much. The driving force in this episode is Joe's love of fries, which comes from the fact that when he would leave giant study sessions, sometimes he would go to a fast food place and spend all of his allowance to just sit there and enjoy something for a bit, but all he could afford was the French fries, leaving him with this sense that French fries are the most important part of a fast food meal, at least for him. Potamon similarly loves French fries, but unfortunately not a lot of Digimon do, and so this restaurant is going to stop serving them, because he's the only Digimon who eats them. This leads to him digivolving and running amok, but the day is saved when Angemon shows up just to enchant Zudomon's hammer, and it is thrown with Joe holding it, so it could be powered by his heart to stop his new potato bud friend. This episode's just so joyful and fun, which is extra appreciated the episode right after a satanic goat is crucifying Gabumon. I need to take a moment to talk about a detail that comes out in episode 46 of the Digimon Reboot involving Angemon and Devimon. Devimon was defeated like 20 episodes ago, but he's back, so we learned that he's not just metaphorically a mirror of Angemon as he's always been, even in the original series. No. He's actually Angemon's, darkest feelings, born from when Angemon was in the miasma. This is very cool in part because while Gatomon is struggling with the fact that she could evolve into someone evil at any time, Angemon is dealing with the fact that a part of himself is evil. The fact that even after TK gives him enough hope that he's able to become Magna Angemon and fix this entire situation, Devimon is still speaking to him from inside of him is so great. We're seeing in this series both the holy Digimon that could still become holy Digimon, the lightest of the light side, are both filled with this darkness that could come out at any time. I just finished episode 50 of the Digimon Reboot, and you know what? I think there might be a couple things worth talking about here. We're gonna have to start with this man right here, because this show's already established that Machinedramon is a dark Digivolution of Metal Greymon, and now he's shown up to be, the final bad guy before they get to Millenniummon. So three of the biggest fighters on the side of darkness are a shadow version of Angemon, the Dark Digivolution of Gatomon, and a copy of the Dark Digivolution of WarGreymon. And you know what? While I bring up these warriors for the sides of light and darkness in this big war, for some reason I feel like I should show these images from episode 47, where we have two sides of Goblimon fighting each other, and end up fighting their own sides because they can't tell who's who because they all are the same. So Millenniummon gets his body back, and I think it's going to be worth mentioning how he gets the power to do this. It's the miasma from the Cloud Continent. Now, the miasma is basically liquid evil, but importantly, on all the Digimon who are turned evil, we see the miasma leaking from their mouths. Millenniummon is being created by the dark feelings by those he's turned. He is the darkness from the good Digimon. This ends up becoming a version of like a recreation of the fight with Apocalypse, where he is a creation of all the negative feelings and destroys all the Digidestined and their partners, except for Tai in this case. And where with Apocalypse, they use the power of all their crests together to like recompile themselves to get back into the fight. This time, all that energy created Goldramon and Magnadramon. And while they have these two giant holy Digimon, powered up by all the positive energy of the Crests, turned into this light of hope, it's still not enough to win. No, what they need to win is essentially WarGreymon doing the Spirit Bomb from Dragon Ball Z, with all of the light of hope from every creature they have met in the digital world. The entire digital world's hope comes together to destroy this darkness. Throughout these last two episodes while they're fighting Millenniummon, we keep coming back to this corsage that Kari made for Tai. This collection of flowers that is made so much more beautiful by being a bunch of different types coming together rather than just being one singular flower on its own. Almost like all the different kinds of goodness and hope from all the Digimon of the digital world coming together in Tai's heart to create that last attack. Let's talk about the Digimon Reboot, episode 54, the Vagrant War Demon Rebellimon. And do I need more of a reason than just that title? So this episode brings us Rebellimon, the ultimate level of Ogremon, who was a reoccurring bad guy in the first chunk of episodes, with his last episode being episode 9. Ogremon was already very interesting in this series because rather than just being a bad guy who is bad because he's bad, like he is in the original series for the most part, here it very quickly takes a turn because of his pride. He's much more concerned with having a fair fight against Greymon than beating the kids. And in what we think are his final moments, he shows all the Digidestined the path they need to take in order to find the holy Digimon they're looking for. 45 episodes later, we get Rebellimon, a Digimon who we learn has essentially died and fixed himself with junk data, but he has no memory of the past. He's no longer fighting for the bad guys in any way. He's really just looking for the best fight he can. He wants to beat all the strongest fighters. And this episode takes him from just being this wandering warrior by himself to having Cutemon as a little partner to help him on this journey. This feels like it's meant to be a play on Saber-Leomon from the original series, where the time with the Digidestined allowed Leomon to reach Mega, here being a kind of darker version of that, where Ogremon's time fighting the Digidestined kind of destroyed him, but he had so much will, he put himself back together, and now he could have a little friend of his own. In the 2020 reboot of Digimon Adventure, Crests aren't given the same explanation as they are in the original series. Instead, we get something that is both hilariously cheesy and, well, kind of beautiful.
そうか。このデジタルワールドで彼の誠実で純真な思いがデジモンたちとの友情を結び、知識によって救い、勇気と愛情を育み、希望の光を灯した紋章の謎の答え、それすなわち彼の冒険、その全てなのだ。
Now, I think it's obvious why I find this hilarious, because ultimately it is saying that the Crests are the adventures we had along the way, and I just think that's funny. But let's get into what I think is the more beautiful side of this. The way the traits we usually see as connected to the Crests are being described here, they're not being assigned to any one of the children. As we look at how it's being kind of montaged here, we're not seeing Tai specifically come up with courage, and Joe specifically come up with reliability. It's just all of the kids and the adventures they had connecting to all of these things. What this ultimately achieves is it de-emphasizes the specific traits with these specific kids with specific character arcs, and instead puts the focus on the adventure itself and how all of these traits with all of these children are affecting not only them, but all of those they've come in contact with. This is essentially taking something that's implicit to the nature of storytelling, that a character is going to go on some adventure and either change themselves or the world, or refuse these things, and making it the source of their power. It is the fact that they went on this adventure, they experienced this specific story that led them to the point that they are at now. Well, of course, I love the more personal journey that is had in the original Digimon Adventure and how the Crests are treated there. This also feels like it holds equal but different levels of value in what it's saying as a story. Because as important as it is to find these more positive emotions within yourself and use them to fight back against the darkness, it is equally important to be able to spread this positivity throughout the rest of the world. Or, in short, as important as it is to find that hope within yourself, to inspire it in others is amazing. And to go on a journey where you're not just finding it in yourself, but spreading it among all the people you meet, that sounds like an adventure worth having. So the final episodes of the Digimon Adventure 2020 reboot do some cool shit, and now I gotta talk about it. I think a good place to start on this is talking about the concept of balance in this series, a series that has been driven by this ancient war between light and darkness. A light and a darkness that we've learned is literally two sides of the same coin. Angemon, our final bad guy, is not only presented in design as like a dark version of Omnimon, but he's someone trying to completely destroy balance. And not even by just putting all the weight on one side, by consuming everything so there is nothing to balance. And as much as it's the side of light fighting him, darkness can't have that either, and they protect the light. This was such a great moment in the penultimate episode. But it doesn't just come down to the fact that Angemon's trying to destroy the balance by consuming everything. It's that gaining power through consuming everything is obfuscating an important part of gaining power. This is something first brought into the series with Devimon and our first glance at Machinedramon, where if you just go for direct power without earning it, you lose all control. We see this more as we get to the Eternal Continent and everything is gaining power through Black Lightning, just this sudden surge of power that doesn't require the work. This is contrasted with all the survival of the fittest stuff that shows up when we first get to the Eternal Continent, where it's all these Digimon fighting each other to get the data to earn the right to Digivolve and seemingly maintain themselves because of it. Which brings us to why this version of Omnimon was the one able to win. A version of Omnimon that's WarGreymon and Crests. We first see Omnimon in episode 2, and then we see Omnimon and all the normal megas again in, I think it's episode 5, maybe episode 6, when we see the original war between the light and the dark. While these are presented as forms that these Digimon were always going to make it to, these two are special. These two came out of very particular circumstances that only could have happened during this entire adventure, by having the adventure, by absorbing specific data in specific fights. We see the same thing when Angemon comes into being, who shouldn't have necessarily existed, but came out of Palmon absorbing the maraca and the musical attacks, all to become this more musical Digimon. These are all forms that specifically exist because of the adventures they went on. And earning these powers by going on the adventures themselves gave them their strongest force. Digimon Adventure 2020 didn't just let the entire team reach Mega, they gave us like a 50% increase in how many Digivolutions the team gets. Reminder that with this season, these guys have been turned into Dark Digivolutions who get their own lines for the most part of Angemon, Gatomon, and Patamon. Of course, it's not just something they let happen. It's not that the other Digidestined weren't allowed to have their Digimon reach Mega in the original season. It's that it fit better for that season for them not to. I mean this in part very literally. There is nearly 25% more episodes in the remake, so of course, yeah, let's give us more stuff. But I also mean figuratively, with what they're doing, with what it meant to reach Mega in that original season. Because, let's remember, how did we get WarGreymon and Metal Garurumon? It was The power of light and hope mixed with the power of familial love going into these two main characters, arguably with them holding hands and getting shot by angels, arguably also activating their crests of courage and friendship, all at the same time. This huge fusion of absolutely everything needed to create these two. This situation that could only be done for these two. Only having them reach Mega made this something incredibly special and made it incredibly important. Even when we go to Adventure 02, Imperial Dramon, the only Mega there, comes out of, hey, there's this orb from one of the guardians of the entire digital world that could bestow power on you. Again, it's this super important thing, this thing that shouldn't happen to most of them. But then Tri makes the same choice that 2020 will eventually make of, what if we just have Mega be a more intense version of the same way they activate their crest to reach Ultimate? I don't think this is in any way a bad choice. I think it makes a lot of sense for exactly what those things are doing, but it is worth noting that as much as Adventure and Tri are in the same timeline, they're in the same universe, they're in the same canon, whatever words you want to use for it, they are separate stories. The original season is a story, and then Tri is telling its own story, continuing off from there, and the themes are shifted, and the meanings of things are different. And just a final note to end on, even the season where every one of the Digidestined Digimon reaches Mega, Gabumon gets 2 Megas, Agumon, Patamon, and Gatomon all get 3. Now that I've finished my Digimon Adventure Reboot rewatch, I feel like I've uncovered a dark secret about it, and I gotta walk everyone through the plot a little bit in order to reveal it. So near the beginning of this series, we have a bunch of kids going to a digital world where they're almost immediately told about an ancient war where 2 sides fought, and the side that is seemingly more good was the side of the Holy Digimon and some ancient warriors. And now these kids are going to have to use the power of those ancient warriors in order to stop this war from happening again. The first thing they have to do to stop this war from repeating itself is to find a Holy Digimon who is one of the forms of Patamon, and after this, they gotta find one of the forms of Gatomon. As they collect Holy Digimon, as they grow in power themselves, they end up at the one who is actually trying to start this war and fight back and kick ass. Oh, but what do you know? That's not the end of it, because there's actually someone else pulling the strings the entire time. Someone who is pitting both sides against each other. Turns out these 2 sides are incredibly important to continue on. One side can't defeat the other. They have to kind of exist together. But there's somebody who's trying to force them to take each other out so they could take all the power for themselves. The only way to defeat this final bad guy? Combining the powers of multiple Digimon together. The Digimon Reboot isn't just a retelling of the original Digimon Adventure. It's the characters from Digimon Adventure living through the plot of Digimon Frontier. Let's have a little fun. Here's how I would personally approach a version of Digimon Adventure 02 that could follow the reboot. Immediately we're at a different starting point than the original 02. We have some things that kind of go against the original 02, like the fact that Patamon's already become Pegasusmon without needing to armor Digivolve. Or the fact that while 02, by the end of it, is heavily about the fact that there always needs to be people on the light fighting back the darkness, the reboot makes a big point of the fact that light and darkness are kind of 2 sides of the same thing and need to be in balance. But while we're closing some things off, we also open up some possibilities, like the fact that Tai stayed in the digital world with Agumon, or the fact that Mimi and Izzy started a company together where Izzy is opening up a gate to the digital world. So with all this in mind, what if our starting point for 02 isn't Tai getting kind of an SOS from Agumon and going to the digital world, but he can't get Agumon to Digivolve? What if it's all the old Digidestined getting an SOS from Tai and he's gone missing? On top of this, I want Izzy to have actually figured out the digital gate and made it so the source code is online, so anybody who finds it can do it. But rather than having the 02 kids be important because the 01 Digidestined can't have their Digimon Digivolve because of all the Dark Spires, since all the 01 Digimon partners are in the human world at the end of the reboot, what if they can't go back? Or at least, what if all of them except the 2 Holy Digimon can't go through the digital gate for some reason? This opens up a lot of the same possibilities. We need these new kids to go with our 2 Holy Digimon Digidestined to go find Tai, but we're not stuck with having to have armor digivolving as the reason why the original Digidestined can't be useful in this. Plus, if we've opened up the possibility of the gate all over the place, we could have the entire series doing a kind of thing like the World Tour, where the Digidestined are constantly coming across different Digidestined from across the world. But we have to have Ken coming in differently than the rest of the new Digidestined to pay homage to the original, so why don't we put him with Tai? In the original O2, Ken adventured in the digital world with Rio. What if when he started going to the digital world, he was adventuring with Tai, and whatever's got Tai now also captured him? As TK, Kari, and the new guys are trying to find what's happened to Tai, the mystery first leads them to Ken. Maybe he is a dark version of himself like the Digimon Emperor, and we'll deal with that for a little while. But ultimately, Ken holds the mystery to what happened to Tai because they were together for a while. But we need more than this mystery going on. We need a big threat, and I don't think it could just be darkness returning again because, well, we've already ruled that out because the reboot is about the balance of light and darkness. So what are we going to do instead? One of the major themes of the original O2 is kind of like passing the torch. It's the reason we got these new Digidestined, and we're already touching on it a little bit by only the new guys being able to go to the digital world in the start of what I'm pitching here. But what if we take this further? I've already started talking about this version of the digital world having humans entering it all the time. The digital gate is widely available. What if the ones in charge don't like this? O2 introduced at least one of the harmonious ones, the ones protecting the digital world. What if these guys were ruling the digital world and weren't happy with how things were changing? And more than that, what if by the end of the series, these four are meant to take their place? Now it's taken this idea of passing the torch, and instead of that just being like a given, just being an easy thing to do, it's fighting against the older ones who don't want to move on, who don't want the world to change. Plus, it gives reason for all these four to reach their own individual mega, because presumably those megas would be the new harmonious ones. The fact that their entire adventure would be with these holy Digimon who also have these dark shadow forms would be about teaching them about the importance of this balance. How it's not just good versus evil, light versus dark all the time, that they have to be able to see things from every angle, and sometimes that's going to lead to difficult choices. So yeah, that's at least my basic idea for a potential O2 reboot. I don't think it's fully thought out, but I think it's at least the nugget of a decent starting point.